Welcome to the Be Still, Be Aware series, where nothing is off limits. I'm your host, Claire Foord. Let's talk. Hi there, thanks for joining us for the Be Still, Be Aware series. Today I am joined by special guest Bree Amer. Some of you might know her from Big Brother, or also from her media experience. She is a self-proclaimed communicator. She loves to chat and talk for a living, so I look forward to chatting with her now. We are going to be hitting home hard. We are talking about stillbirth again, but we also are going to be talking about what to do when your doctor won't listen, how your baby is communicating with you in pregnancy, and finding joy after loss. So join us as we chat with Bree, and let's talk.
Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this series is recorded and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging.
Thank you so much for joining me, Bree. And I know that there would be many listeners and viewers that would be watching and hearing, your voice and listening intently to what you're probably about to talk about. Knowing your story somewhat, but there will be many that perhaps don't know your story. So I would love it if you would tell us a little bit about you and your journey and obviously your pregnancy and motherhood journey. Would you indulge us?
I will. Feel free to interrupt so it's not a big monologue.
But if it's a monologue, that's totally fine. You just talk and we'll just chat.
Talk. Okay, yeah, so my husband and I fell pregnant with our first child about it would have been about 6 years ago. And we fell pregnant really easily. It was after a couple of months of trying, and we were kind of thanking our lucky stars at how it was all kind of falling together. We very quickly found out that it was a little boy who we named Archie. And the pregnancy, it was really straightforward. No morning sickness, nothing, no red flags throughout the whole thing. Basically, we decided to go with a private obstetrician because naively, really, we assumed that was the best thing to do for our child, and that would kind of be the safest route. And I did the prenatal classes and all that stuff, and never once during prenatal classes did I ever really hear the word stillbirth. To be honest, I actually don't think I even really understood properly what it was. I always thought it was something that happened during birth. So, I was a little bit naive to those sorts of complications. But as my pregnancy went on, people kept saying to me, my sister-in-law particularly, you're small, you're really small. And I kind of put it down to me being really tall. I'm 5'10". And everyone, especially when I got towards the 30 weeks, 35 week mark, everyone was like, oh yeah, you haven't blown out like a lot of people do. And part of you's like, oh, thanks.
And everyone carries differently as well. Some people are tall and small and other people are little and big and vice versa. It's a really weird pregnancy myth that everyone has to carry a certain way. But I won't. So you noticed it too, but we're like, oh, okay, well.
I did, and my sister-in-law kept saying to me, what's your fundal measurement? And I was like, what's that? And she's like, does the obstetrician measure your stomach? And I was like, no. And so when I went in to see him, I think I was in the early 30s weeks. I said to him, I keep being asked by my sister-in-law what my fundal measurement is, and what is that? And I feel like I'm quite small. And he was like, no, you're fine. I measure with my eyes and my hands. So he said it was unnecessary, basically. And then not long after that, but it reassured me because I thought, well, he knows better than I do. Maybe that's, a thing. We kind of moved past that quickly. And then, the only other thing that kind of started to raise concerns was movement slowing down. And that happened around the I reckon gradually from around the 34-week mark. And it just changed. Archie's movements changed. And, I'd go for long periods without feeling him. And so I'd, do all the things that you probably shouldn't do and you should go straight to a hospital. But I'd have a drink and I'd, lay down and try and feel him. And so over was probably only over about a week, actually. I was getting a bit concerned. And then I had a day where I like didn't feel him until, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I went to the obstetrician, and I was about 36 and a half weeks. Went to the obstetrician and I said, I'm just not feeling him move as much. Some days I'm not feeling him till late in the afternoon. And he said, okay, let's do a quick ultrasound and have a look. And he said, yep, heartbeat's fine. So he said, yeah, heartbeat's fine. Everything looks okay. And kind of booked me in to have a C-section actually a couple of weeks down the track, which was an unrelated thing. So I was about 2 weeks away from actually, taking Archie home from hospital. And so that we went home that day kind of reassured, said everything was fine. And I woke up the next morning, and as soon as I woke up, I just knew something was very wrong. Like, I think for anyone who's been pregnant, you kind of poke around in your stomach to make sure that they're okay, because I guess that's what you do. And I just felt like I was poking and there was like literally nothing happening. But then I was like, no, he's fine. He was fine yesterday afternoon. You're being paranoid, and, you have all these weird conversations in your head, reassuring yourself, I guess. And so I actually had my baby shower that morning and went to that. And I just sat there the whole time, just going, what am I doing sitting here? Like, I should be going to the hospital. But then I'd be going, no, he was fine yesterday. So anyway, I went home, and as soon as I walked into my husband, I said, I still haven't felt him move today. And like that day, my husband fed me ice cream for breakfast, because he was like, oh, surely like this will make him move. Yeah. So all these things that you're trying to do. And I was like, I just want to go to the hospital. And so we went, and, like everybody else, longest drive of your life, and got there. I remember the midwife, who was lovely, and actually I ran into recently. She, put me straight in. They're amazing, and was looking for the heartbeat. And she was saying, oh yeah, it's okay. I'm looking for it. Sometimes it can take a bit to find, so don't worry. But I could see in her face that her like eyes were starting to like glass over and like well up. And I just knew. And I mean, obviously they went and got the obstetrician and brought him in, who officially kind of broke the news to me and told me that there was no heartbeat and that he'd passed away. But yeah, like I feel like at the moment is just like frozen in time in my head, I guess, because your world stops turning, and it stops turning for a long time. But yeah, it was like, it's a living nightmare, I guess. But we stayed in the hospital at the time. I gave birth to him, I think, about 10 hours later. We were gifted an extraordinary woman who I know a lot of people will have heard of, Deb DeWild, who was our counsellor appointed to us by the hospital. And I truly think without her, the entire experience would have been very different. And the fact that not everyone gets the support that we got really breaks my heart, because she guided and supported us in every possible way. And I just feel so fortunate that we did have that support. For us, I know that a lot of people have autopsies done, which we did, and don't get an answer. But we were really fortunate and did. And it was the placenta had filled with blood clots. So a lot of people have this happen because they have a blood disorder, but for me, it was specific to the placenta. And to Archie. So not, necessarily for any other pregnancy. It was a weird combination of the two. So that would have happened over a period of weeks, maybe a month, which explains why the gradual movement decreasing happened and why I stopped growing. So when Archie was born, he was only like 2.2 kilos and he was almost 37 weeks. So he was really small, like he was in the 10th percentile, I think. And basically what came back from that after getting second opinions and seeking some specialists who only work in the stillbirth field is that it was totally preventable and that all signs were there that something wasn't right, and those signs were ignored, picked up on. Well, they were ignored because I brought them up. But that for me was probably one of the hardest things to get past. I say past because it's, you know, talking about it, I still get a bit of rage, but
understandably,
you know, I had to accept, I guess, because it just felt like such a waste of a life, and just like, it just felt so unfair. And I know everyone feels like that, but, you know, knowing that it could have been prevented, had things have been different, then, you know, he would have been born a perfectly healthy baby, which is just so tragic, so tragic. And, you know, it took me a really long time to stop being angry about it, which I think I have, but it's just, yeah, it's just a shame. And now we've always got that, you know, I now have 2 more kids. I have Hunter, who's 3.5, and Harlow, who's 1. And, you know, they've got a sibling that they don't play with. And you know, he would now be 5, turning 6. And as you know, Claire, like picturing them as part of that family unit, even though I know it probably wouldn't look like this if he were here, is really difficult. It's really difficult. And Hunter's now hit an age where we talk about Archie to him a bit now and have gone a bit more in depth because he can actually kind of comprehend. And his latest thing is asking me all the time where he is. Like, how do I answer that? I'm not a religious person, so
I know.
I don't know how to answer that, and that's hard. Like, yeah.
But love lives on, right? So he's in your memory. He's in your memories.
Absolutely.
And in the memories you create of him with Hunter and Harlow, I think.
Yeah.
You know, Archie is a very special little human, and I can understand the rage you talk about, you know, like.
Yeah.
That's so unfair.
It is.
You know, and it shouldn't happen. You know.
No.
You know, you talked about the fact that you entrusted him. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we thought we were doing the best possible thing by, you know, paying the thousands of dollars that you do to go and get what you consider to be the best for your child, and it's just not the case. Like, I've heard of so many people that have got excellent care through the public system in exactly the same situation as what I was in, you know. So not that it's anything to do with public and private, it's just you expect people to be heard, I guess, is the bottom line of that one.
And I think, you know, in that's so hard. I mean, how do you're like you're trying to, and you can't, you were assertive. Like, you went, okay, hang on, this doesn't feel right. I don't know, you know, is this normal? You know, I've noticed that this is worrying me. So, you know, you put your trust in somebody to be able to advise you not only on the facts so that you're aware of things, but to trust you that you know that something's not right, and you don't know any different unless they impart that wisdom and that power back onto you as mum, as parent in the pregnancy. And I think
that's right.
Unfair.
I always felt like I was being rushed out the door, and I feel like I probably wasn't given the information that I should have been given, because I think I would have become harder work to manage. And I'm sure that's the case, you know, across the board. I shouldn't say across the board, there's some amazing obstetricians and midwives out there, but across the board with problems that arise, I think, you know, you become more work, and it just shouldn't be a consideration. Like, it's just outrageous. And I think the more, when like this happens to you and you're devouring the internet and trying to read everything you can, and like I was saying to you before we started, I remember very early on in the days after Archie died, reading your story and Alfie's story, and, you know, you're devouring all this, and I think the more that you find out and the more that you realise how common it is and how often it happens and could be avoided, the more upsetting it is and the harder it is to then get past.
And I think, yeah, and I think also the whole, you know, how do you heal? And do you have to? And who says how long it needs to take or how you're meant to do it? Like, there is no right or wrong, and there's no rhyme or reason often with a lot of these scenarios that, I think it's interesting that you say, we were lucky enough to get a reason behind it, but it's also this, seriously cruel as well. Because you're
Absolutely
thrown in the face of going, well, that was actually totally preventable and identifiable.
Moving forward and having other pregnancies, I think I would have found it torturous not knowing. Just have so much respect for the women and fathers who go through subsequent pregnancies without an answer, because I think that's a different level of strength that you have to find within yourself. Whereas I could, when I was pregnant, went to a specialist who specialised in high-risk pregnancies and heads up most of the research, in Sydney and a lot of it in Australia into stillbirth. So I knew I was in really good hands, and they knew exactly what they were looking for. And I think had I not have had that, I mean, it's amazing what you can deal with when you have to. So I'm sure I would have. It would have been torturous. And I know that there's so many people in that situation, and it's hard.
Really hard. And I think a majority of stillbirths, in the third trimester remain, unknown. We don't know. And I think that fact that we don't know is also a fear-inducing thing from a clinical perspective, because they go, well, if we don't know all the answers, it's like I have to have all the answers before I can do anything. But
That's
actually,
right.
in this case, we already have many things that we're totally aware of, and you alluded to one of those things already in your pregnancy. With Archie, he behaved differently. He became unresponsive. You talked about trying to sort of wake him or do things to get him moving, prod him, but that he became lethargic. You sort of described this slowing down. And do you, hindsight is a beautiful and an awful thing, because that the conversations of what if, but you did report a change. And what do you wish what can you impart in terms of other people who are expectant mums out there who go, you know what, I have noticed my baby being different. You talked about the fact that you wish you didn't wait. But I think it's also beautiful that you did get to have your baby shower. I know that it's a bit of a double whammy there, but
I had two.
you had two.
Two for Archie.
Yeah.
It was a big success.
But I think that's nice, because you still got to, people were part of his life and got to celebrate him.
Yeah. And those people were so profoundly affected by his death. And that's something that is obviously horrible to see everyone around you going through, but also something beautiful in the sense that he was so cared about by people who never even got to meet him.
Yeah.
And that's so nice. Yeah. But my takeaway, look, I always say to women who are pregnant or in interviews like this, because obviously I try to have this loud voice about this subject, because, it's what I've done in my past. I talk for a living. So if one person hears it and goes, I'm going to go to the hospital instead of sitting here at home worrying about a baby not moving, then I feel like my job in life is done. But, I'm always saying just go to the hospital and be loud enough to be heard, and don't leave until you're reassured and feel happy about it. And look, it's a weird message, because I did that. And I think I honestly believe had I been sent for like a CTG and been monitored for a couple of hours, then I would have realised that the movement wasn't consistent, rather than just a 30-second check of a heartbeat going, yes, there is one.
Because he only looked at the heartbeat. He didn't look at anything else.
That's right.
It was the health of your baby.
It wasn't a prolonged monitor of a heartbeat and movement. And when someone's saying to you, the baby's not moving, I think it's kind of an obvious step. But yeah, I think that you definitely have to follow your gut as well. Like, to be honest, I had a feeling, I don't mean to go down like a too much of a spiritual path, because I'm actually not really a spiritual person, but I felt like something was wrong even before the movement had slowed down. My gut was just telling me that something wasn't right. Like I said to one of my best friends weeks before this, I just can't picture bringing him home. Like I can't having him in this space, and it's like I feel like something's like not right. And I feel like as mums and as pregnant mums, we have an intuition like that is off the planet. And I think that you really have to follow that and have belief in yourself and in your ability to know when something isn't right. And I think surround yourself with good people. Like if you feel like you're not being heard by a midwife or an obstetrician or a GP or whatever, then go and speak to somebody else. Like, you know, change your care or get a second opinion. And I just think, you know, unfortunately there's people still with the wrong message out there. Like my daughter's 15 months old. I presented to the hospital even after my history with Archie, with reduced movement, and the midwife told me next time have a drink of orange juice and wait at home for a couple of hours and see if she moves. And I was like, are you really telling me that? So I think educate yourself as well and know.
Total myth, by the way, for those that are listening and watching, total myth. It's not
don't
get your baby. Yeah, don't do that. If you're worried about movements, you know, that's not great advice. That is old information that physiologically shouldn't work. You know, and it's madness.
Yeah.
So sorry I interrupted you, but
No.
I want to make sure that, you know,
No.
like you said, people have to act. And if somebody's not listening or hearing you, keep pushing. You know, you are mum and you
That's
are
right.
a parent. You have a say. You're allowed to speak up. But it's hard. I mean, you know, your scenario is exactly an example of that you did, but then what? Well, what happens next?
Had I have known more, then I probably wouldn't have been reassured by that. And it's a hard thing because a lot of pregnant people, and I may have been one of them, don't want to hear the bad stuff. Like I've literally had people go, oh, no, I don't want to hear about that. I went with the Stillbirth Foundation and did an event once, like where we had a stall and watched people walk pregnant. It was a baby and toddler expo. I'm sure you've done them.
Yeah.
And people walk around us because they didn't want to know about it. And I get that. You don't want to add stress to yourself, especially when stress isn't something that you want during pregnancy, but information is power. And I just think that if they were in these prenatal classes where they're like telling us how to change nappies and how to, you know, some of the information they were giving us was just so ridiculous compared to the necessity of knowing when to ring the alarm bells.
Yeah.
Like one awkward or fear-inducing conversation in order to save lives.
And that's even if it is awkward or fear-inducing. I think it's as awkward as we make it.
For the people, the conversation.
Totally. Love that. It's usually the person having the conversation.
That's right. Yeah, like that is kind of awkward about it.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be, right? I mean.
No. I mean, if you can see
nothing.
Have third degree hair between your vagina and your bum, then surely you can have a conversation about, you know, but like alarm bells and like warning signs for when things aren't right. You don't have to actually go straight down that your child's going to be stillborn if this happens. No, if this happens, go to the hospital because it's a sign of something not being right.
We don't know which baby is vulnerable to stillbirth. We don't know. And that's the thing. This is a conversation for everybody because there was nothing wrong with Archie.
There was nothing wrong with
but his placenta didn't function the way that it was meant to. And there were clots that were affecting the function of his placenta. But there wasn't anything wrong with him. So he deserves every bit of life.
Yeah.
Just like the baby next to him, just like the mother down the street, just like, you know, the children that are running around where our kids should be. And it's a cruel and bitter twist that now our lives have these pivotal moments. Our kids have helped our voice, even though, you, like you said, I love the fact that you said, I talk for a living. So I'm going to continue to shout this. And, that's the gift we can offer these babies that don't get a voice for themselves, is we have a voice. So we have to know how to use it. You used yours in your pregnancy, but didn't know where to go with it from there. And so you were shut down, your intuition. And I think you're pinpointing that, and the importance of your intuition is really powerful, because it's actually not about being spiritual or believing in signs and things like that. It's actually not. It's about, it's a true thing. It's a connection between you and your baby. And there is a life growing inside you, communicating with you. And that is a powerful, powerful thing. How else are they going to talk to you?
Yeah.
Like, movements is obviously a big tool that our children have inside us to be able to communicate, right?
Absolutely. And on the flip side of that, for anyone listening who's pregnant, if this gives you some kind of, because I don't want to give people the idea of dread, like I was sitting there going, this baby's going to die, because it wasn't like that. It was just a gut feeling that something wasn't wrong. In my pregnancies of Hunter and Harlow, I always had a feeling that it would be okay.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
So when really you would think, after having the experience that we had, you would go into the subsequent pregnancies with a bigger feeling of dread. And that wasn't the case. So I don't want anyone to feel like that's, mapped out in your future. Absolutely.
I think it's really important to say that, because there is actually research to back that up too, in terms of this feeling of not necessarily doom, or dread, something's not right. And also, if you have a feeling of dread or concern, or I can't imagine bringing my baby home, like you described it doesn't mean that, oh my goodness, well, you're doomed.
No.
Have that conversation with your care provider, because they need to know, because there is research around that, and research to support the fact of that intuitive sense of a mother. I mean, if we look at outside of pregnancy, the first thing that a pediatrician does in talking to or trying to ascertain a baby's health is talk to mum and say, so tell me about your baby, what's happening with your baby. So if we can change the way we do that in pregnancy and ask the right questions, so tell me about your baby, what's happening with your baby. But in your case, it sounds like the clinical assessment took over the conversation.
That's right.
That, it was, okay, well, this machine says to me that there's a heartbeat, so you're fine, and so's your baby, see you later. But a heartbeat is simply just that. And if we,
that was the thing I didn't know.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't.
You don't know what you don't know. So I love that whole, that advice that you've given earlier. Empower yourself with knowledge, arm yourself with information. It's not to fear or to, have that worry. I don't want to hear the bad stuff. It's actually informing yourself so you can make the choices that are right for you, your body, your baby, and give you that informed choice.
Yeah. And it's not even all on the parents. And I know probably what you're trying to change, and I know at the Stillbirth we're trying to change, and that is making sure that the right information is given to the parents so that they don't have to find it themselves.
Exactly. It's not just your responsibility, it's a unit of care. You're all part of this. But just as much as they need the machines, they actually need you, because you're the only one who has 24/7 with your baby. And I think obviously in your, subsequent pregnancies, it's really interesting that you say that, you would have thought that level of anxiety or that fear factor would have been through the roof. But the concern or that, that worry was actually more so in Archie's pregnancy.
Yeah. Particularly, so Hunter was born after Archie. With him, I was confident the whole way through. With Harlow, I actually presented to the hospital a couple of times. I was worried about her movement, and interestingly, when she was born, and this was right towards the end, and interestingly, when she was born, she was also very small. So she was measuring quite big the whole way through. So Yeah, it's funny. Like I definitely am a big believer in the gut instinct and I know all the work that you did with counting the kicks and things like that. And it just shows that at the end of the day, it works. And I think, just making sure that you have a presence and an awareness about that, and their daily movement and things like that is just empowering yourself.
And I think that's really important, that your baby has an activity level, a strength, a pattern and a frequency of the way they behave. And if we talk about your pregnancies, Archie obviously had that pattern, that behaviour, and his behaviour changed. And, in all of your pregnancies, I'm sure all your children behave differently, and you just described that. But, it's scary actually to hear you say that, that movements actually did change in your third pregnancy, and she was small.
Yeah, she was small. So she was actually only a couple of 100 grams bigger than what Archie was. But she was fine. Like, she was absolutely fine. But I know that there was conversations that happened with my obstetrician and the paediatrician going, she's quite small, but, didn't go. I could have sent the placenta away and had it analysed and all that. At the time, for me, it didn't feel right because I was enjoying having a healthy baby there.
Yeah, she's there.
But, so I'm so blessed and lucky to have the two kids with me here today, and to obviously have Archie in here and to talk about.
Yeah. And I think it's, you talked about your kids growing up knowing Archie. What are you doing to encourage that conversation? What are some of the things how do you communicate?
Look, we have a beautiful urn, which is like a candle, which we have Archie's ashes in, which we light all the time. Every birthday of his, we go to Maroubra Rock Pool. It's this place that I was at every day, because the day Archie was born was like 40-something degrees, I think. It was so hot. Oh, no, it was through the hottest summer. That's right. I was pregnant through like the hottest summer on record or something like that. And so I was down at this rock pool all the time, just sitting there like a whale, kind of getting the cold all over me. So that was strangely the place that I really associated with him. And I know I struggled at the time, as I'm sure you did, and a lot of people do, with not having the memories to kind of, hold on to, and yet I feel like that would be the hard part of losing a child if you did have a lot of memories as well. It's such a double-edged sword. I guess the moral to that is there's no easy way to do it. But I associate that place with him, so we go down every year on his birthday and throw lavender into the rock pool. And I think, having my eldest only being 3, it's not something that we've had big in-depth conversations with him about, but we recently moved, and a good friend of mine had a painting done of a photo of Archie, and I was packing and it hadn't been on the wall. It had been I kept it somewhere else, and my son saw it and went, "Oh, look at that painting of me." And I said, "Oh, actually, that's not you." I said, "That's Archie." And I had spoken to him about Archie before, but he just didn't retain it, because he was too young. And so then he was like, "Who's that?" And so I went into this, entire conversation with him about it. And I was saying, well, before you were born, Mummy and Daddy had another baby, and it was a boy, and his name was Archie, and his mind was blown. He was like, "What?" And I said, "But he was born sleeping, and he wouldn't wake up, and, he died, unfortunately, and but he's someone that we're going to talk about all the time, and that's him, and he's your brother." And he was like, "Oh, my little brother." And I said, "No, actually, he's your big brother." I said, "But he'll always be little." So, had this big conversation with him about it, and I thought, I wonder if he'll retain it this time. And a couple of days later, he said, "My brother Charlie?" I said, "Archie, yes." And then he started asking me all these questions about it. So for the first time ever, it actually sunk in a little bit, I guess. And to be honest, as much as it's raised hard questions from him for me, like where is he now, I have really enjoyed talking about him more with Hunter. Any excuse to talk about them, right?
Absolutely. And look,
a lot of people shy away. So,
they do shy away from it. But I think it's really interesting because, I know of people who, and I suppose this is a bit of information for you and for those that are listening and watching as well, is that, I know of people whose, they are now 18-year-olds and their sister would be, in her 20s. And I remember a story that their mother shared with me saying that he actually got in an argument with someone in the playground because it was the fact that he just really needed his sister to be validated. They were doing, family trees or ancestry at school. And he just said, I need you to understand that I did have a sister. And it was the teacher that actually said, oh, yes, but there was something wrong with her. So she wasn't really your sister. She died and there was something wrong with her in pregnancy. And he said, no, she was born. There was nothing wrong with her, but she died and she was stillborn, but she's still my sister. And it was really interesting that his connection and the connection that this boy had with his older sister that he never met was so strong, and that that camaraderie of brother and sister and that protection that he felt he needed to have for her was so strong still, even though he'd never met her, he'd just grown up with her. So I took a great sense of security in that personally when I first heard that story. And interestingly, my kids now are starting to, they've always talked about Alfie, and, obviously we have Still Aware and we have birthdays for babies, and they've been celebrating her life, with all of this that goes on around them and, what we now do full time and the energy we put into this organisation. But the interesting thing is my son and daughter recently were getting quite upset because they suddenly realised that they were never going to meet her. And so whilst they've been very comfortable, so I think that there, I suppose the lesson in that maybe is there is no easy road for this. That this is a journey that I'm learning, that you're learning as our kids learn with us. But what I will say is they're strong. The kids are strong.
How old are your two?
So Ada is 3 and Archie is 5.
Another Archie.
Yeah, another Archie.
I had mine.
Sorry?
That's easy. That your Archie is 5 and mine would be 5.
Exactly. I know,
when you
right?
Born?
So Archie was born on April the 9th.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
And mine was born on April the 12th.
Yep. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Wow. And it's not like it was a ragingly popular name right then either.
No.
Actually going to call him Archer. That was his name. Knew that he would get Archie when he was little. And so then when he was born, it was something weird, and we were both at the same time kind of said, well, he's always going to be that little boy for us. So we decided to go with Archie instead of Archer.
Yeah, well, Alfie's very similar. Our firstborn daughter, she was named because we already knew that Archie would be Archie and Ada would be Ada, and their middle names both were started with an L. So their initials were ALF. The names we had chosen, and we were pregnant with Alfie and called him or her Alfie the entire pregnancy because we went, oh, that's cool. That's like, it's not, but of course with the intention that, when we didn't know when she was born whether she would be a girl or a boy. And we thought, we were discussing it and we said, well, no, there's no way that this is Alfred or Alfreda. It's literally Alfie. There is no question about it. So similarly to I suppose what you're saying is that the name, stuck, and that's her name and will forever be hers. But
and I guess often people say, and I've even experienced a bit of this myself with the other ones, you kind of have names in mind, but then you think, I'll just see when they're born what their personality is like, or, how I feel when they're born. And I guess you don't have that. So you therefore draw on what you have of their personality and your time with them. And so I love that they kind of have the pregnancy versions of their names.
Totally. Me too. I think that is we said earlier on, there's no right or wrong way to do anything, but Alfie was always Alfie to us and will forever be in everybody, whoever wants to remember her with us and live on in that way, wherever And that's the thing, is we don't know what happens. Nobody truly understands. It's one of those questions of what happens after this. But all I do know is that our children and Archie, and Alfie have cemented something in us that is a formidable strength. And, it allows us to impart that strength onto others, because truly neither of us, amongst so many other families, would ever wish this upon anyone. No one wants to be part of this club, and it's not. This parenting journey is weird. It is weird being a bereaved parent.
It is. And I think, you asking me before what my message is to people, and I think something that I also try and get across, and like you said, it's different for everybody. I remember which is part of the reason why I read your story, once the shock wore off and I was looking on the internet for all this information, and I think you kind of have this desperate need of trying to read something that tells you that people are okay and functioning and back to some level of normal, whatever that might be. And because I know for me, in the days, weeks, months after Archie's death, I was like, my life's over. I'll never be the same again. I'm never going to go to my coffee shop again. I'm never going to walk down my street and people are going to ask me about the baby. I'm not going to go back to work. I'm not going to do this. And I just desperately wanted to read a story of hope. And I often say to people, and there's no guarantee in anything, anyone who's newly bereaved and newly going through this, I'm okay. And, I'm happy, and you do find the joy in your life again. And I think that it's so important to know that that's possible for people.
Yeah, that is such a good lesson for life, is that there is, it's important to find that joy, and that even in all that sadness, you can eventually find it on the other side.
Definitely.
Whatever that is.
Archie brought some real goodness into my life too. I must say, some of the people that I have met are just the best of the best, be it, the Deb DeWilds, or, I was part of a PALS group, Parents After Loss, and it was like a support group when I was pregnant with Hunter, and they were all pregnant post stillbirth, and now those women are some of my best friends in the world. And, just being able to kind of be involved with things like this, I guess, is a bit of goodness too, because it just makes me feel like I'm doing something for him, which is great.
So important, because, just like you said, you've got 3 kids, 2 here, and, 2 in your heart, and Archie in your heart and in your mind and your soul, and living through memories. And I think it's cruel, but like you said, he's given you so much joy, even through the fact that he's not in your arms to hold. And I'm so sorry that he isn't.
Yeah.
I wish it was different, but I also do think that was a really nice way of ending a great and very worthy conversation. I really appreciate you bearing your soul and sharing where you're at and your journey in motherhood, that started in a way that was so confronting and very, very different than you would have ever expected this journey to be. Coming out the other side, with a smile on your face and with sunshine in your heart. It doesn't always feel awful. I think that's a great way to enable those that are listening and watching this that might be in the depths of their grief right now, to hear that they are going to be okay, and that there is sunshine and joy in life.
There sure is. It's coming your way.
So thank you so much, Bree, and I look forward to continuing the conversation some other time.
Yes, please. It was lovely speaking to you, and thanks so much for everything that you do for this weird little community we have.
I love that, the weird little community. It is a weird little community, but so much love, and these, like you said, there's so many good people that we've all met in this space, and I think, what would life be like? It's only a weird. It is a weird little community. Thanks for being part of it. All right. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to you joining us again next time. Remember, it's never too early to have a conversation, but it really can be too late. If you'd like to know more about Still Aware, the charity that's bringing you this series, head to stillaware.org.